everyone. I want to say thank you for tuning into this podcast, to this episode of Ambition, where we're talking life, culture, leadership, preaching, communication, a lot of different aspects on this episode. Without you guys, this podcast would not be running. So, with that being said, I do want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening, for all the comments and the questions and the emails and everything that you guys do. You guys are awesome. Um, I want to introduce you to this guest. He is a brother. We've done life together. He's one of my best friends. I've known him for 6 years. He is, if I can be honest with you, he is somebody who I'd bet on for a lot of different reasons. So I want to introduce to you my friend Daniel Talavera. Amazing guy, the best guy you could ever meet. Um, with that being said, I do want to put a disclaimer on this podcast. As you will see, it is a FaceTime podcast due to COVID. Um, so I do want to thank you guys for your patience. If there are any interruptions in this podcast, I want to apologize for the quality, and I want you to. I want to thank you guys for your patience. I love you guys, and I hope to see you soon.
For a second there, I thought you were going to red button me.
I thought about it.
Daniel, my brother, welcome to the podcast. Oh my God. I think this is our second retake. The first one I was recording, but only my audio came out. So we're going to talk about how I am a terrible podcast host.
Yeah, wasted a whole hour of my
life. Hey, but it was like I actually gleaned so much from that. So, it was like here's the thing. We always talk about how we need to record our conversations because of how legendary they are.
We really do. Really do. I feel like we talk to each other like we're on podcast, or like it's like we're talking to each other, but we're talking to like some invisible thing in the distance, and we're kind of not looking at each other. And we tilt our heads, and we're like, "In the beginning, was easy." We talk like we're talking to like in some deep I don't know the or something.
No, definitely. We talk to each other. We're like I feel like we're, in a way, we are extremely philosophical when we're around each other. It's like it's Aristotle and Socrates, or Plato. They're all gathering together, and it's like we have those deep and interesting conversations. No, most definitely. For all of our guests, if anything cuts out, I'm sorry. This is the second episode of COVID Chronicles, so I'm working off of my iPad mini and my hackbook. So please forgive if there's any.
I don't think your listeners know what that is.
So yeah, so a hackbook is basically it's my laptop. I have a Dell XPS 15, and my boy. It's a very good laptop for a PC. I've used it for 3 years. Went through a couple classes in college with it. I did a lot of photo editing on it. I think there was actually a video edited on this laptop before. Really good. But I had the bright idea with my boy. I was like, hey, would there ever be a way to turn this into a MacBook? And he's like, dude, say no more, fam. And he did it for me. So it was super awesome. Jose, he's the mastermind.
Yeah, we can name drop. We can name drop Jose. We're trying to get him a job.
Dude, hey,
he's a master producer. He's a master computer tech whiz, whatever you call it. That's a beast.
Yeah, no, Jose is the brains behind everything. Like, if Jose was running the tech part of this podcast of COVID Chronicles, it'd be a lot better than what it is. But sadly, you guys are stuck with me. But he is, seriously, everything what Daniel said and more. He's a producer. He's a graphic designer. He's a photographer. He's a videographer. Hire him for your next event. Super awesome. I believe his website is lowsolutions.com. So feel free. We will have a link down below to his Instagram account and to his website. Without further ado, let me at least give you a proper introduction because I didn't give you one. Without further ado, I want to welcome my brother, my best friend. I love this guy. I've known you for, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe 5 years at least. At least
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Right around
I
5 or
think
6.
I think we met at Bible college. And I was wearing extremely tiny pants, and you, on the other hand, were very modest.
I'm not modest.
To say the
I'm
least.
not modest. Because
You know.
people always said something like, "Ah, your shirts are too tight." I was like, "Well, I'm skinny and I have muscles, so it just looks bad."
I want to welcome to our guest. I want to welcome to this podcast my brother, my best friend, Daniel Talavera. He is a fellow leader. Him and I have done ministry together. We're doing life together. You're going to be joining the Marines soon, so you're going to add that to already your long list of accolades on your resume. So, Daniel, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. It means a lot. What happened? Oh, you lost me. Oh, basically, I just bragged about you. So, thank you for coming on.
But I mean, what good does that do me if I can't hear it?
It prevents you from getting a fatter head than what you already have. I'm kidding.
Not wrong there.
Daniel, you and I, we have done ministry together for a short time in our relationship, in our friendship. We've done, you've been a part of projects that I've done. You're currently doing, not necessarily a public project, but a private one, for yourself, that way you can express who you are, where you're at currently in life. You and I have been around each other for a while in different arenas of our life and in different seasons of our life. But one of the biggest things that you and I excuse me, COVID Chronicles, it is real. All right. But you and I have been around each other in different seasons of our lives. And one of the biggest things that we've connected on as a whole is leadership, is honesty, is transparency, vulnerability with each other in different aspects of our life. What I wanted to talk to you about mainly is because you and I, we've had this role in our lives as being young ministers or young servant leaders in different seasons of our life. And I wanted to really bring that to light as far as how what it actually looks like behind the scenes when nobody's looking, when nobody sees you on stage, when nobody sees you knocking people over and putting a modesty cloth over them after you got done praying for them. Hopefully it was a spirit and not your bad breath. Okay, let me stop really quick. Has that ever happened to you where you were like, crap, I don't have gum and I don't have mints, but I need to pray for this person? Has that ever happened to you? And you're like all up in their face, all up in their grill. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I mean, I used to drink a lot of coffee, or Red Bull. I used to. We had this old youth that he would live off Red Bulls, and it was ridiculous. So I started kind of taking that habit. So yeah, I found myself like, man, I just had like a Red Bull. I just scarfed down something during service, and I forgot to buy gum. So this is what you do. You just pray from them from a distance, and they'll hear you. They don't have to smell you.
The anointing is not in the breath, but deliverance is in the breath.
No, just instead of laying your hand on their forehead, just grab their arm or something and talk to them from the side.
From their ear, all right? The back part of their ear, not the front part, okay? I have been...
Face the different direction.
Direction brings the deliverance, okay? Let's preach that. I remember I seen this on Twitter one day. It was this young lady, she was tweeting, and she said, I think I fake spoke in tongues one time because all the ministers were trying to get me to pray through to the Holy Ghost, but all their breath had microphone breath. Like, I needed them off me.
Yeah.
I've been through so many of those stories. I remember, oh my God.
Have you ever had an experience where you really wanted someone to stop praying for you, You're like, you know, kind of back up. You ever have that?
I will be 100% honest with you. I may lose Christian points after I say this. I was in a
I'm
service.
just trying to get you to step on a landmine.
I'm gonna step on it. I'm gonna dance on it too. It was awesome. So what happened was I was in a service one day. I was in a service out of town, and um, this young man came over and he came to pray for me. And I known who he was. I knew what he was doing. And this is gonna be. I have to tell the whole story, or else it won't make sense. So I was in a relationship with this girl at the time, and she told me that he was trying to talk to her.
Uh,
So he comes over, knowing who I am, and he comes and he prays for me, and I know who he is. So I take his hand off and I say, "Brother, with all due respect, no, thank you."
I know what you're over here lurking.
Yeah, like you're trying to see if I'm actually saved or not. I don't know.
Tell me why. All right. Tell me why I knew it was gonna have something to do with a girl.
Now you're making me sound like a Romeo, man. Calm down.
What's hilarious is like I've had one situation where I was like praying and I was like really having like an intense moment with God, and someone came and prayed for me. I was like, leave me alone.
I've been there really, I think too often that I can count, to be honest with you. And it was one of those things where you have, how do I put it? I remember in particular, it wasn't necessarily with me, it was with a dear friend of mine. His name was Isaac. Not your Isaac, all right, but another friend of mine. His name was Isaac. Awesome guy. And hopefully he doesn't get mad at me for name dropping him. Jose, cut that name out, actually. That way it doesn't get me in trouble. But there was this one time in particular, we were in this conference. And if you've ever been prayed for by my father, I don't think you ever have, but if you've been prayed for by my father has a scorpion tattoo on his hand. So what would happen is he would bend your head back. And people after that, they seen a tattoo on his hand, they seen how he would pray for people, and they called him Scorpio because of that moment. So what would happen is 9 times out of 10, one of two things are gonna happen if my dad's praying for you. One, you're gonna fall over, or two, you're gonna start dancing. One of the two things are gonna happen. I kid you not. So this friend of mine, he he gets prayed from by my dad, and my dad knocks him over. All right, modesty clause, slain in the spirit, whole 9 yards. This other brother in Spanish, I can't quote it. I'm a white Mexican, please forgive me. But in Spanish, this other minister comes over to my friend and he says, "Get up in the name of Jesus. Get up and worship God. Stand to your feet, worship God." 5 minutes later, my dad comes back over to him, prays for him, knocks him over. Again, the other minister in Spanish comes back to my friend and said, "Levántate, get up in the name of Jesus, worship God." Said, this happens, I kid you not, this happens 5 times. So where he goes back to the pew, he's like, I'm tired of this. Oh my God. So you and I, we've grown up around church, we've grown up in church, and we've been a part of ministry, at least for me. I've been a part of ministry for the better part of my life growing up. All right, talk to me a little bit about you. You've been in ministry since high school, or been around it since about high school, correct? What is it? What is it like as a high school? We're gonna go through college and stuff in a minute, but what is it like in high school carrying the role of being involved in ministry? Did you feel any like huge pressure? Did you feel any huge awe? Did you ever get a fat head? Like, I want to know, like, what is it like for you in high school? What was that responsibility like?
So I think
It's funny. Yeah, you're probably right. I did have a bigger head than I should have, and I probably said a little more than I should have a few times because, uh, you know, when you're younger, you don't really have a lot of self awareness, and even if let's say God gives you a word,
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean He wants you to go say it.
Oh, I want everybody to pause really quick. Pause. Tweet what you just said. My God. Just because he gives you a word doesn't mean he wants you to go say it. That will save a lot of up and coming young ministers right now. Continue. Sorry, I had to do that because that was powerful. That was tweetable. Go ahead, continue.
I mean, let's go off that for a second. Like, even if you're meant to say the word he gave you, you still have to say it in love.
Yes.
You still have to say it in love. And there's. I remember the first time I got the opportunity to do a 5-spot, and it went horribly.
Wow.
Like I basically said something about you're going to hell. And I can't. It was like I knew. After the fact, I was like, I knew I didn't prepare properly. I didn't know how to prepare for a message. I was just like, okay, God, like, yeah. And I love my dad, but he's not a preacher.
Yes.
But he's just great man, but not a preacher.
Right.
So he didn't really. I never seen how to prepare for a message. I just remember just saying something. And I said something about hell, and I was like, and I thought about it, when on my way home, and I was like, wow, that went really bad. I should not have said that. I'm over here 15. Yeah. High school's that time where you can learn a lot of those little not little lessons, they turn out to be big lessons down the road, but it's where you can make those mistakes and still get up from them. There's like people, I mean, certain relationships with other people you can bounce back from, because I mean, being involved in ministry at a young age and being a high schooler who wants to talk to trying to think of a PC way of saying it.
Trying to experience the female gender. Yes.
Yeah, there you go. You see where I was going. I had a lot of lessons to learn with that, and I remember I completely shoved my foot right down my throat.
Look, as many preachers do, though. As many preachers do.
But I'm saying, yeah. But I mean, someone gave me. And you heard this advice a lot. It's like, don't date someone in your church.
Yeah.
Don't. I mean, I see why it's so easy to, and it can work out. Like, it really can.
Yes.
But if you mess up, she gonna know all your business.
Yeah.
She gonna know everything about you, and she's gonna be around you. It's like you can't leave. It's like you're gonna put other people around you in a weird position, but you're not going to leave your church, and most likely she's not going to leave her church over you. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be this weird, icky kind of tension, And so those are that's something I had to learn in high school, being involved, and how to, manage that. And, a lot of people, it's just, you learn a lot of little lessons like that. I think that was one of my biggest ones.
I remember a lesson that you told me. It wasn't. I don't think it's like a big dramatic thing to call a lesson, but it was like advice. I think advice would be a better thing, which is your dad told you an acronym. It was KISS, which means keep it simple, stupid. Mm-hmm. I kid you not. Now you saying that your father not being a preacher. First of all, he's a great man, and that you said that earlier. He's a great man. I love your dad. Your dad is so funny. He makes the best cup of coffee. I promise you, tell your dad that he needs to open up a coffee shop. He's so good at it. I've never had better coffee than from his coffee. But when you told me that's what your father had said, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, I kid you not, that changed the way I preached. Because The biggest thing,
Right.
especially for young speakers and communicators, we look at, some of the greatest speakers. We look at people like T.D. Jakes, like Judah Smith. We look at people like Bishop Jeff Arnold. We look at people like Bishop T.F. Tenney. We look at people like
Mm-hmm.
Pastor Anthony Mangan, our pastors. We look at these different people and we're like, oh my God, I have to say some thought-provoking,
Yeah.
jaw-dropping, impactful,
Yeah.
epic line that people are going to remember forever. And then what happens? Okay, what happens is you start getting their sermons, and then you start taking excerpts from them and then put it in your
Yeah.
own instead of getting the word for yourself
Yeah.
in the name of trying to be deep.
You know what lesson I've kind of someone else taught me
Right.
is always preach to your crowd. You got to know your people, especially as a pastor. You have to know who you're speaking to. Even as an evangelist, like you want to find out what city you're going to, what kind of environment. Are you going to the rich side? Are you going to the not so fortunate side?
Yeah.
What kind of background is it? Like Stockton's an immigrant city. You're gonna have a whole bunch of different things. We're an urban, kind of like blue collar, like come at me, bro, type of city. We're like
The
tough guys.
best
Yeah.
tacos ever, though. I'm telling you
Oh,
right
yeah.
now.
Oh yeah, but like that, we're you're gonna talk to someone. You're gonna talk to a crowd from Stockton different than you're gonna talk to a crowd from Santa Cruz.
Right.
So number one, you always want to make sure you cater your message, not cater your message, but make sure you have a message that's gonna relate to the people you're talking to. Number one, and number two is that like you can't preach a because of the time message on a Wednesday night Bible study or a Wednesday night youth group.
You're freeing a lot of people right now. You're freeing a lot of people right now.
No, it's like I love because of the times. I love listening to Landmark, Lindos, all that stuff. It's like great messages. But when you're talking to like some 12-year-olds or like high school age groups that you kind of look at the crowd and that like especially for Pentecostals, they really haven't been they're not second, fourth generation Pentecostals. They're like first generation. We just picked them up. They just got off the bus.
Right.
You can't preach certain messages, and if you do, you have to make sure it's really relatable, and you don't want to turn people off to that. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I'm totally with you on that. Number one, for all of our guests who are paying attention right now, it is not January 9th, 9:41 a.m. My date and time, for whatever reason, is wrong. But I don't know how that happened. All right. But number two, okay, segue there. But number two, no, a lot of people, especially when you're young, because when you're young in ministry, you make a lot of the mistakes that you're talking about trying to preach a ballpark message, about trying to hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
All right. And you're talking about knowing your crowd. The most the hardest thing for somebody to grab is the fact that you cannot tell somebody who does not have a business how to maintain their business, but you can teach them how to start one. And for somebody who's a business owner, you don't tell a well-developed one, you don't tell them how to start a business. They already know how to do that. You give them tips on how to continue to maintain it.
Yeah.
You cannot speak what you don't know, but you also can't speak to a crowd where they're not even in the vicinity. You're talking about how, Cain slapped Abel with a rock. These people know that Tupac got shot. They don't know who Cain and Abel are. All right. I'm just, they know about how to surf. Okay, they know how to surf or they know how to start a business, but they don't know that one of the greatest businessmen in biblical narrative is Jesus, because, man, all he had to say was follow me, and he got followers of 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people. All right. So
you know what that just reminded me of is that a lot of preachers, especially in Pentecost, and it's not. I understand why, but I think sometimes we focus too much on getting a reaction you know, and it's like, as a preacher, your job shouldn't necessarily be to get a reaction.
Right.
You want to help. You want to be able to help them, not just on a Wednesday or a Sunday, but you want to be able to help them on a Thursday. Give them a word that's going to help them on Friday, a word that's going to help them on Saturday and Sunday, which is like, how does whatever you're preaching on, how does that help me in my day-to-day life, in my day-to-day relationship with God?
Right.
How can I use that? And one of the best ways to do that is stories. Most people, there's studies about how people communicate best.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people are they like writing. All these different types of. Some people need to touch and feel things for them to learn. So there's all these different learning mechanisms that we, as a preacher, you have to really pay attention to, and realize that most people learn by seeing,
right,
not by listening. Like, I like listening. That's like my favorite thing. But I'm weird that way. That's
right.
not the norm. So one thing you always want to try doing is always use stories.
Mm-hmm.
Stories that you can picture what's going on. Because even Jesus taught in stories.
Yes.
He taught in parables that allowed people, like, when he's talking about, the prodigal son is the first one I can think of. It's like, I literally have an image of a kid, like, eating, like, in a pig pen, and then I have an image of a kid running to their dad, and I have an image of what that kind of farm thing looked like. Like, you should always use stories, object lessons.
No, you're totally right. You're totally right. One of the biggest things that I've looked at least because first of all, I wanna make a disclaimer. Number one, I'm not the best preacher. I'm not the best communicator. I've been preaching for 10 years. All right, but I am.
Yeah.
I still have a lot to learn. Glory to God. I have a lot to learn. All right.
Yeah. Same goes here. I'm not a preacher. I'm not a preacher. I just know how you got to look into how people study, and that goes even beyond. We're talking about leadership. It's how to communicate is vital in leadership, and that correlates to preaching and being a pastor.
Because knowing your people, knowing who you're speaking to, and knowing how they learn is so important. My favorite thing to do, you talked about stories. I just don't always use any story. Sometimes I'll grab something off the news or whatever, or, if I read an article, I think that's awesome. But one of my favorite things to do, at least for me, how I found it effective, is to tell personal stories. Yeah. Because there's something about not just grabbing a story, but something about being vulnerable in the moment, especially if it's a funny story. Be vulnerable in the moment of like, hey, look it, I was a dummy. How does this metaphor segue into the gospel? One of my favorite things is to talk about how I remember I preached this sermon, on forgiveness. I don't need an apology. And how I have had there were a couple cousins at my house, and they were wrestling around and got into a fight. And a couple of the cousins, we were all around and we're like, hey, older one's gonna win. No, the younger one's gonna win. I mean, you know how it is at Thanksgiving. You gotta grapple around once or twice, all right, or else it's not Thanksgiving.
Or down 20, you can be like, all right, this guy's gonna win in 10 seconds.
Especially in big families, So one of us, I can't lie to you, it was not me. I was not the holy one. It was another cousin of mine who decided, we're adults. Okay, we have to break the fight up. So they broke the fight up, and they looked at the younger ones. They said, all right, what are you gonna say? I'm sorry. What do you say? I forgive you. Okay, now what do you say? I'm sorry. What do you say? I forgive you. I kid you not. We all left the room. 5 minutes later, those younger cousins, our younger cousins, who were just swinging for the fences, who were grabbing each other by the hair, who were fighting dirty, all right, they were going at it. It was like a UFC/WWE fight. They were going in for the blood.
Yeah.
They were playing together like nothing happened. And then I passed by the room and I'm like, yo, y'all good? And they were like, yep. They popped the P at yep, because everything was fine. Everything was dandy. But it's easy as a young kid to forgive.
Isn't it funny that Jesus said you got to be like a child.
You have to be childlike. It's easy for kids to forgive because it's just Play-Doh. It's just bricks. It's just toys. It's just army men. It's just a video
Yeah.
game. But when you get older, it's not my video game you broke. It's my trust you broke.
Mm-hmm.
It's not it's not my toy that you stole. It's my virginity that you stole.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all these different things that you hurt, but you hurt my heart. You know, that little story, as comical or interesting as it was, is a decent segue from it's easy when you're 5 to forgive. It's a lot harder when
Yeah.
you're 15.
Yeah.
And I feel when you can tell those stories, it's not just a thing of like, oh, I'm filling time. I have to, make my time on the meter. The pastor gave me 40 minutes to speak. I have to make the time.
Mhm.
No, you're being vulnerable in the moment. You're being transparent in the moment. You're also cutting some of the tension, especially if you're a new speaker. You're cutting some of that tension because if you're trying to fill the crowd out, guess what? The crowd is trying to fill you out.
Mhm.
In leadership, it goes to the same way. In leadership, as a leader, you're not just trying to fill out the people that you lead, but the people who you're leading are trying to fill you out as well.
Yeah.
Now,
for sure.
one of my biggest things that I've made a point to live by, especially in my relationships, in my friendships, all right, I am big on honesty. All right,
Mhm.
I am 235 pounds of sexy. All right, I am a big boy.
Can we edit that out?
Don't be jealous that I'm fine as wine and twice as sweet, baby. But I'm 235 pounds due to COVID. I lost a lot of weight. Glory to God. But I'm 235 pounds. I'm a big boy. I can handle honesty.
Yeah.
I can handle honesty. If you cannot be honest with me, you cannot lead me. And if you cannot be honest with me, then you can't be friend. We can't be friends. I'm sorry. You could be an acquaintance. You could be someone I can say what's up to. But in my inner circle and my friends, you and I have built a relationship on honesty. Sometimes brutal honesty. You're laughing because you and I know how true this is. How honest we are.
People, if they listened into some of our brutal, honest conversation, they'd be terrified.
They probably question
Like,
how we're actually friends with each other. It was.
If you and I were brutally honest the way we are with each other to someone else, like, we would destroy so many bridges.
We would probably get a restraining order because we'd be considered mean or something. I don't know. I want to hear your input because for me, honesty is such a huge deal.
Yeah.
It is such a huge deal. How has honesty in your growing up experience from high school ministry to college, being involved in around ministry in your college life? Right now, you're not currently necessarily involved in a positional leadership ministry. Labels. We'll talk about that in a minute. But how has honesty for you played a role in your style of leadership? Because you're one of the most honest people that I know. Why is it that you choose the honest route instead of the I'll placate to your emotions route or I'll placate to your feelings route?
Well, like kind of like what we mentioned earlier. Let's preface the honesty conversation with, if you're gonna be honest, you got to do it with love.
Yes. And
that's the lesson I've had to work on. Is all right. You can be honest, you can be straight up, but you got to do it with love.
Yes.
You can't just be brutally honest, especially if you don't have a relationship with someone. So the reason why I've always pushed to be honest is because to be a leader, you have to have a true relationship with someone. Like, there's a thing that goes,
You cut out really quick. I want them to grab this. You started at the saying. What was the saying?
So the saying is, you can't correct someone.
Your audio cut out again, I promise you. Say it again. You can't correct what? Sorry.
You want to say it slower? You can't correct someone.
This is our relationship for everybody who's tuning in. That right there.
I forgot people were listening. Okay? No, but for real, you can't correct someone you don't have a relationship with. You can
Powerful.
try to, but you kill people that way, and I mean kill people spiritually. You can't lead someone you don't have a relationship with, and you can't have a relationship that isn't built on honesty, especially in leadership, because trust and believe they will know.
Right.
They'll find you out. Okay, so like one philosophy I have about like trying to gain information for leadership and involving it into the church is that you want to try to get information from other sources. You don't want to stay in the church bubble necessarily.
Right.
So my big, like, I love listening to football leadership, and Michael Lombardi, he's like been around football for all his life. A lot of
for sure.
Great people, Al Davis, Bill Walsh, and
Belichick.
Belichick, and it's like they're like, and if you don't know sports, these are legends, absolute legends in not only leadership, communication, but legends in football. How they built teams, like crazy amount of knowledge, right? So one of his things is he was talking about a coach, and he was saying how he knew he wasn't going to succeed, and they just played a sound piece of him talking about him a couple years ago, and he was like, he's just trying to be someone else. He's not being himself.
Wow.
He's like, I would have told him to get rid of the pencil, and the reason, okay, I'll tell you why. Because this guy would wear a pencil on his ear to copy Bill Belichick, right? And he had a laminated play call sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And why you got a pencil on your ear with a laminated pencil with a laminated play sheet? And if he was willing to like copy to that detail, something from Bill, what else was he doing? He was copying everything, and it's like the players knew.
So one question I got about that, because I just opened up a whole nother door, which I want to walk into. Yeah. People have said, I don't know who, so I'll leave it as anonymous, but people have said, I think it's imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Yeah.
When it comes to leadership, a lot of people have said that you'll start off as an echo before you find your own voice. So
I think that's true to a certain extent.
I want to dive into that because I knew that you would have a certain extent, grabbing into that. That's why I love you. I love you. All right. It's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. When is it okay, if I can say it this way, or not okay? I don't want to say okay. When should you start diving into your own voice and not being an echo?
I don't think you should ever necessarily be an echo. Whenever you take in information in life, generally, you always need to take it in, dissect it, and make it yours.
Right.
Like Paul, I think it was Paul. He's talking about. I think he was writing in the Church of Corinth where it says, hey, here's what I'm teaching. You guys took what I taught, and you guys looked in the scriptures and double checked it and made sure everything I was saying was true. It's kind of what we have to do with leadership, because every leader has their flaws and every leader has, their strengths. You want to be able to take their strengths and leave their weaknesses and try to build on the shoulders of greater men.
Right.
So you take your way of getting leadership and understanding and pastors and all that stuff, being around great people, is always try to take what they have, think about it, understand what they're trying to do, and make it your own. Because if you do that, you can take the good and bad from other leaders and become an even better leader. And I know if you had great leaders, they want you to be better. They don't want you to take everything from them, because number one, you're going to seem inauthentic, and number two, you don't want to take on their weaknesses. So whenever you're learning, you should always make it your own. Always make it your own, because it's like the only way to prove that you're actually thinking about things and being a thoughtful person is to dissect it.
I love how you're saying that, because for me, when I started preaching, I promise you, I kid you not, if you were to look back to where I started when I was I actually started when I was 12, but officially, started at 15. When I started
Yeah.
at 15, or 14, I can't remember. No, 15. When I started at 15, my goodness, if you looked at me, you would be able to pinpoint, depending on how far your reach and Pentecostal preachers are, you would be able to pinpoint, you sound like him, and him, and him, and him, and him. And I remember that story. I would be telling other people's stories because I didn't live enough. How much life have you lived by 15?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
How much life have you lived by 15? But now at 22.
Do you think that's because you're regurgitating information that you haven't experienced? And like now you can preach more your own message because you've actually digested like information and wisdom through like life experience.
Yeah, I feel like in the beginning stages, especially for young people who are ministering on platform ministry, pulpit ministry, I feel like for a lot of us who started out, or me specifically, is ask me theology, I will answer everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you ask me experience, it's hard for me to tell you because I'm 15.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting my mustache is barely coming in at 15. All right, I actually need to shave this off soon. All right, but my mustache is coming in at 15. Okay, I don't even think I kissed a girl yet, by 15 probably. I don't know. But all these different, the many, okay, you've kissed 20, whatever, Daniel. All right. The point is,
let's not get into that like that. Let's not even go there.
What I'm saying is at 15,
I get you.
can you really answer experience? So yeah, to answer your question, that's a long answer to say, yes, I think you're regurgitating more of what you heard and less of what you know.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to a certain stage, and even at 22, I possibly can one day recycle some of the same stories. But at 22, you lived a lot more life than at 15.
Mm-hmm.
You've also learned how to segue into different stories instead of just mumbling and jumbling and trying to go from John 3:16, for God so loved the world, I stubbed my toe, and that's why God loves you. Like, your messages start to make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where finding your voice actually comes into, is because here's what I do now. What I do now is, if I listen to a sermon, I'm not listening to a sermon to say something how they'll say. I listen to it, first of all, for content, obviously, so I can feed my own soul.
Yeah.
But I also listen to them, especially I love TED Talks because they taught me how to actually make my time. Okay, I think I'm learning now that if you can't preach a 45-minute sermon in 5 minutes, you shouldn't be preaching it at all. You have to go study again. But I've learned through TED Talks, through some comedians, not all, because I don't watch a lot of comedy, but when I do sit down and listen to it, my favorite is Kevin Hart and God, I can't remember the other one. We were just talking about him today too.
About Dave Chappelle?
Yeah. He's somebody. I don't necessarily just listen to him for their content. I know I just had like a lot of Christians just judge me right now, but I listen to them because comedians are some of the great. They are. I'll just go out on a limb and say they are the greatest communicators, because you can make a crowd. You can make a crowd cry. You can make a crowd laugh. You can make a crowd feel depressed. When you are a comedian, you have the power in your voice. And if you mess up once in a segue, in a transition, I don't care what it is, if you mess up one time, the whole show is over.
Yeah. Especially like if you pay attention to how they're like the greatest finishers.
Yes.
And like they start off with a low key random story, and you're like, where is he going with this? And then you kind of see how it progresses and builds on each other as the show goes on, and then he brings it up like clearly at the end, and he's like, all right, good night, folks, and you're like, oh, that's really funny. Like,
yeah. That is literally
now all the 10 other stories you told, now it ties together.
Because what you're doing that whole show, you're not just telling individual jokes.
Yeah.
You're telling jokes that are a part of a team of one big story.
Yep.
So now that we're diving into communication, I think we've spent a lot of this time on communication, which is awesome. I believe communication is a big part of it. I want to transition a little bit, especially since we're winding down. First of all, I want to say thank you for coming on again. We need to get you back when it's not COVID Chronicles. Jesus Christ.
So there's no risk of an audio failure. All right, I forgive you this time.
Yeah,
next time I expect reimbursement for my time.
You expect the red carpet, glory. No, we need to get you back on so we can have a longer discussion. But we've talked about communication. We've touched on a little bit about how honesty plays a huge role, and especially in building a foundation from a leader to somebody who's following your lead, and then from somebody who's looking up to you as a leader. Honesty. I remember, God, there's one movie called Beyond the Lights, and then there's this person who's running for office, and then there's this singer, love interest, whatever.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing the commercials for that movie.
I actually love the movie. It was awesome. But he tells this girl who he's in a relationship with, because they break up, get back together, the usual storyline.
Yeah.
He said, truth needs to be the foundation of the relationship. If there is no truth, another word for honesty, if there is no truth, then there is no relationship. So talk to me about, now that you're not necessarily in this current season of your life, you're about to join the military, so you're not necessarily in positional leadership, which John Maxwell has often made it clear positional leadership is the lowest form of leadership. Talk to me about what it means now that you are living your life, you're joining the military, you are, I don't want to say, because you're not just a Christian, you're a Christian, as what you and I were talking about prior to this podcast. You're not just, and I want you to dive into that too.
Okay.
But now that you're not in positional leadership, so to speak, how do you continue to live your life as a leader? Like, as far as church or work, and now that you get to join in the military, how does that affect you?
The greatest ability is availability.
Powerful. Yeah.
Most cliche thing ever, but
it still works. It still gets the job done. Yes.
So I focused on reaching out with my pastor and being like, okay, here's my skill list. Let me know when you're ready. And there's other things that are going on with that, but I think the biggest thing that gets missed in positional leadership is the relationships with people. And honestly, I think
you're cutting out. 1 second. You're cutting out before you continue. You cut out at honestly, I think.
Honestly, I think we don't pay enough attention to relationships in positional leadership, and sometimes we forget how important a call and a text are, and one that isn't related to where were you on Sunday?
Oh, wow!
I missed you on Sunday, or hey, we're having an event on Wednesday. Let's. I think we as Christians need to realize that what keeps people in church, I don't know if I said this or this was caught, but what keeps people in church is relationships. And it's ministry to have a relationship with people.
Right.
And that's why, it doesn't matter if you get along with everyone in your church. You got to love everyone.
Yes.
And you got to be friends. You not friends as in, you have to be loving and create a supportive atmosphere that they want to come back, no matter what happens to them, no matter what kind of life they go through, what kind of life situations they're in. You want to make sure that your church is one that is welcoming, loving, supportive, and forgiving, and one that's not judgmental.
Right.
We've gotten into this a couple times where so many times. Should I get into it?
We
You know,
can we
you know,
can dive in. We can dive in. We can dive in. We're on the
well,
closing scene, so let's go out on a
fuck,
bang.
fuck. Okay, let's not do that. Let's not go there. No,
I
but
want you guys to know that we just missed Savage Daniel by like 2 seconds. Okay.
yeah, we'll say
But I,
that
I
for another
want you though. I
podcast.
want you to entertain though. I want you to entertain the concept because again, we're diving into I guess a new subcategory. I
Yeah,
want you to dive into the importance of building relationships um and not destroying them because
oh
church hurt is a real thing. Okay, church hurt is a real thing, and relationships are make or break, especially when
yeah,
you are involved in positional
yeah,
leadership.
but yeah. One thing that I've always tried to remember is God said, "Vengeance is mine,"
Hmm.
and I'm not um, bold enough to try to take God's place and try to exact my own vengeance.
Powerful.
So one thing my pastor said that has stuck with me, and I've done my best to try to live my life this way, is always take the lower road. And I don't know why you thought I said bishops always take the lower road. No, just always take the lower road.
I remember when you
because
first said it to me. You first said it to me. You and I were taking. I think we were either moving something or we were taking out trash
yeah,
together. And you said you were holding the door open. And I promise you, what I heard was bishops always take the lower road.
no,
And I
it's
was
just
like, because for those of our listeners who aren't accustomed to church positions or titles or a hierarchy, if you want to call it that.
mhm.
um, Bishop is one of the, if I can say it this way, one of the higher positions within an
It is
organization.
it is.
You have in some church cultures it
It's
goes.
it's an elder. It's an
Yes,
elder, a pastor of pastors, an elder.
yes,
It's
it
a
goes.
demanding respect.
It
But
goes deacon, it goes
mhm,
minister in some church cultures, deacon, minister, pastor,
mhm.
elder, and bishop. So when
You're talking about like level 5, level 6. You're talking about like the higher ups.
yeah, you're talking about the
Talking
people
about
who
You're talking about like the real deal.
the
But
bishops.
the reason why I don't like saying bishops take the lower road is because we're all supposed to.
Yes,
We're
yes.
all supposed to forgive.
Hmm.
We talked about this a little earlier in the podcast, and it's one of the least taught church right now is and too many times, some people get the attitude of like snap, snap, snap. I'm a child of God. You ain't gonna do me like that. And it's like,
Mm.
well, it's not your responsibility. It's God's responsibility to look out for you, and it's your responsibility to love people.
It's God's responsibility to look out, but it's my responsibility to love. You need to write a book. You need to write a book very soon. I remember this phrase. It's God's job to judge.
Mm-hmm.
It's also His Holy Spirit. It's His Spirit. It's His job to convict. But it's my job to love.
Yeah.
It's my job to love.
Yeah. I mean, how many, and we forget sometimes how many times we've been in a position that we've hurt people,
Mm-hmm.
and how God forgave us. And sometimes we want God to come down with like heaven fire, send heaven like fire from heaven down and like incinerate someone.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the Old Testament when God has the earth swallow someone up and their whole family, and you're like, God, can't you do that to this one person? And it's like, no, I didn't do that to you. Well, it's like, don't worry about them. It's like the speck, trying to take the speck out of your friend's eye when you got a log in your own eye.
I remember this one evangelist whenever he was being funny.
Analogy
Oh no, yeah, no, for sure. One of the this evangelist, whenever he would be funny, you'll know who he is when I say this. He has a Batman voice. He would always say this If someone were to cut him off in traffic, he would say "God kill," you know, or he would say "hand or fist," you know, like you know.
I remember because I got a picture in that service actually where there's one person worshiping with an open hand and someone worshiping with a closed fist, and I wanted to caption it so badly: hands or fist, God, hands or fist.
I really wish you would. That would have like, oh my god, that just
Only people who were there would have gotten it though. So.
that's literally perfection. In the closing moments right now, there needs to be a part two in Israel and Daniel. You know, a COVID Chronicle part two, which hopefully will happen soon. Don't know how soon.
Hopefully, it's not a COVID chronicle.
it'll be a real one soon. You know.
I'm trying to get into studio, man.
I'm trying to get COVID cleared. All right, but so in the last few moments, you're about to join the military. Okay,
Yeah.
we've discussed that. You know, John Maxwell, one of the greatest leaders, a leader of leaders, John Maxwell, in many of his books, he said positional leadership is the lowest form of leadership. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, that analogy simply means your boss is your boss for 8 hours, but then after those 8 hours are over, deuces. Okay. So
I think a good caveat to put in on that is positional leadership that's only based on position.
yes. Oh my God. Yes.
Because
Yes.
you can have a great positional leader, as in have someone in a great position and then be the greatest leader, but it's not because of the position.
Mhm.
Like if you have to tell someone I'm your boss, you're not the boss.
Mm.
Or you might be the boss, but you're not a leader. And leaders get the job done no matter what, essentially. And bosses,
They're just bosses. I want you to,
it's
in
hit or
your
miss.
closing moments,
Mhm.
in your closing moments, I want you to discuss, discuss, maybe even leave a cliffhanger for our next conversation. I
Mhm.
want you to discuss how a leader, he is always, he's always leading by example. And he's not, I'm going to try to phrase this correctly. It's not, I've paid my dues,
Hmm.
so now follow me.
I'll leave it with this, and this is we think of leadership in the exact opposite ways Jesus taught us sometimes. Because he said, the first shall be last.
Right.
The last shall be first. And he showed us what a leader should be like.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, God manifested in flesh, got on his knees and washed the feet of his disciples. And this isn't just regular nasty, feet of, us humans today that, we might just be stinky and sweaty. This is literally, you had human feces, you had animal feces, you had the dirt of all the things that they walked in, because this isn't like modern day. These feet were dirty. Like this is poop stained feet. And God said, all right, I'm going to show you what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And leadership is getting down on your knees in front of people who may have backstabbed you, and people who might be talking dirty about you, people who might be hurting you and ruining your name, or if you're a pastor, they might not be paying their tithe.
Yeah.
And you got to get down there, and you got to wash their feet, and you got to serve. And this will really be the last thing I'll mention is one thing this, I'll name drop him, but I'll say brother, Reverend Terry Shock, he said something that resonated with me. And it's not about you. And that's just, it's not about me. It's about Jesus.
While you were saying all that stuff and I was listening, and I almost cried twice.
Yeah.
I'm an emotional wreck, so for all of our listeners, if you grew up in a preacher's household, you would be too. You know, but while you were saying all that, and you were talking about how Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, you know, it's crazy. My pastor phrased it this way at the Last Supper. He said Judas ate too.
Mm.
Judas, he ate too. And and these are the words of the Apostle Paul rang in my head, and that was, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus."
Mm-hmm.
Though he was in the form of God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to, something to hold on to, as in, I'm God, you came and served me. But in the words of Jesus, Jesus said, I have come not that the Son of Man to be served, but that the Son of Man shall serve.
Mm. It gets you, man.
I'm literally like,
and you get flabbergasted by how much Jesus, the creator of the universe, cares about you.
Yeah.
And is like, I think you and me talked about this earlier, and it's like, yeah, pray about that because he cares. And it's like a little minor thing, and it's like, yeah, it's frustrating you, but like, am I supposed to pray about this? Yeah, because he cares.
If it's big enough to think about, it's big enough to pray about.
Yep. It's like, don't insult God thinking he's too big for your little problem.
Powerful. Daniel, I want to say thank you so much for jumping on this conversation with me. One of many that we've had and that we will have. For those of our listeners, this is generally kind of how our conversations go when we're in a very deep leadership spiritual mood. But the first 10 minutes of the phone call or of this conversation is generally how the conversation goes. Daniel, I love you. We need to get you back on soon. Really, I mean that. I want to thank all of our guests and all of our listeners who have been faithfully listening to the podcast. Please do me a favor. Like, heart this on Spotify, download this on Spotify, helps us a lot. On iTunes, you can leave a rating and a review.
5 stars, only 5 stars.
5-star content,
send it back.
especially this episode because we had a 5-star guest by the name of Daniel Taylor on here. See, I have to flirt with you at least once, you know. But
yeah, don't use the word flirt.
yeah, that was kind of creepy. I don't know why that
weird.
came out.
Don't
That was
weird.
we should end this now, huh? All right, leave a rating, leave a rating and review on iTunes, YouTube, please. Comment, complain, question. We want all the smoke here on this podcast. Ambition, we love you.
Talk to him.
Yeah, you know, email me at dveryBest@gmail.com. I'm kidding. Hopefully that's not your real email. But if it was,
I mean,
then
it might be my Snapchat.
add them on tap. I'm just kidding. But email us at ogwsufg@gmail.com with all your questions. I would love to answer those questions on the podcast. I would not be here without any of our listeners.
Yeah.
So for all of our listeners, our family, thank you for joining in on this conversation. These conversations happen only because of you. We love you. Please, if you wish to get some merch or to donate to this podcast, because equipment does tend to get a little expensive, you know, feel free to go on our website at www.ourgodwillsaveus.com. We will have the socials down below for Daniel and for myself and for everybody who makes this production happen. Daniel, I love you, brother. And to our Ambition podcast, I will see you later.
Peace.